Okay, so we are at learning today a footnote from the essence of Hasidus, which I just announced I'd like to study next, or if not next, at least following that, because I want everyone to have a sefer. It's very worthwhile, and between Kfar Chabad, Yerushalayim, and Bet Shemesh bookstores, I would hope they can get you the volume. So Yoni, do you have it or not? Yoni, I don't hear you. I don't hear you, Yoni. What's going? Oh, mute. Oh, wait. Unmute. Go ahead. Unmute. Isser, speak. I want to hear Isser.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So
Okay.
why am I not able to hear Yoni?
Could be a problem with his microphone, or he's on mute.
Yeah, Yoni. No, Yoni's not on mute, but Yoni, we can't hear you for some reason. Maybe Yoni, maybe yeah. He'll go. He'll come back on.
Okay. So you have it, Moshe, now? Okay, so it's page 22, footnote 7. This is a note to explain better, hopefully, what Moshe asked about the difference between the Nefesh Elikis, Sichlis, and Bahamis. And this is from the Sefer Hatomim.
You hear me now?
Yes.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yonason, are you there? Do you have the Sefer on the essence of Chassidus, or do you have the WhatsApp that Moshe sent?
Oh, I have the WhatsApp that Moshe sent.
Okay, good. So it's the page 22, footnote 7. So this is from Hatomim. Hatomim, just for your information, good to have basic Chabad information, was a journal that was put out in Poland in the Lubavitch Yeshiva in the 1930s. The editor of which we found out later was the Rebbe, but you won't see his name. You won't see his name as the editor. The editors' names are other editors, and they, of course, work with the Rebbe. But the Atomim was a publication that had chidushim, novelties in Nigla, in Talmud, ideas in Chassidus, Chabad history, and happenings, things that happened in the general community that Lubavitch had, yeshivas and shtiblach, and it's a very important historical piece of information. In addition to the Divrei Torah there, which some is incredible, deep, and very profound learning. There's also, it gives you a sense of what was going on a little bit at the time in Poland, 1930s, and the intermingling of Lubavitch, Chabad, and other communities like Belz, and even Bovev, and the different communities where the Rayatz, the previous Rebbe, sent some of his Talmidim to share Hasidus and to strengthen the breakdown of the time in Polish Jewry, where a modern current swept Poland, as we've discussed, many times, from my own family's ancestry to many others. Take a look at the grandfathers. They had full beards and they looked like tzaddikim and everything else. And the kids were already modern without beards and without yarmulkes. And they made their way, whether it was to Central America, as some of my relatives, or Canada, or America, or Eretz Yisrael. And they were, poverty was so great at that time, and they didn't want to have any more of that, and they pretty much left. So I don't know if they, I'm not sure they left with anger and rebellion, but they didn't want to have, and they wanted to, live normally, and they didn't give in to they didn't want to cooperate with the lifestyle. Also, Zionism was very, very powerful. The Tzionim, they infiltrated all the communities, and they were very Zionistic. Yes, Moshe.
This, what Rabbi Dalton, what you're saying now is applies to Warsaw?
Of course, in Warsaw too. Now, Warsaw had so many Yidden that there was a very strong feeling of Frumkeit and Chassidischkeit. But I'm sure if you take the figures, it was non-comparable to the others that were not that way. But I understand your question because we always hear about Warsaw, Rabbi Soloveitchik, who's, the Brisker, the Litvak, the Snagid, as he would call himself. He talks about how he saw the Yidden coming into shul after the mikveh with the wet payas, and it left an impression on him, and the warm songs at Shalashudas, how it made an impact on him. But that's a tiny amount. So, but it was palpable. It was. Do you understand? But Warsaw was. I'll give you an example. I'm glad you asked that. I remind myself of something that I don't think I ever told you. This is interesting. I came across a letter from Rabbi Shochat's father. His name was Rabbi Dov Yehuda Shochat. We know Rabbi Shochat in Los Angeles, Emmanuel Shochat, Olav Shalom. Those are the Shochat's sons. Their father was Dov Yehuda, and he was a massive Talmud Chacham, and he was born in Telz, and he learned in Telz. And he became, somewhat of a Lubavitcher later, and it's a whole history and why. I wrote a lot about it in my book on Chabad and Telz, because it was a big revolution. I mean, he was one of Mr. Telz in America, and he knew the Torah. There's a lot to speak about. He was the father of all the shachats, okay? So I read a letter. Telz started, it's going to be funny what I'm going to say now, but they started just like the Meshichistan, formed a group. Well, Telz had a similar group. And guess what the name of the group was? The name of the group was Noisim Es HaDegel. We carry the flag. Like the Meshichistim have their flag, right? I'm telling you, I plotzed, I cracked up, but I read this. Telz 1930s is talking about a group they started called Carrying the Flag. What flag? The flag of Telz. And Telz, had a very unique and different approach in the Litvische world, and it was a very interesting approach, and in certain ways it shared some with Chabad, and I think I wrote about that too. I believe that they, I think that they picked up on some of Chabad's approach, and they had a very interesting idea of having in each city, or in as many cities as possible, wherever there was a Telzer student, they wanted him to carry the flag. They wanted him to influence others with the Telz Shita. And they were looking for influencers. We'll use a word that's very popular today, influencers. Well, Rabbi Dov Yehuda Shochat became a rabbi in Basel, Switzerland in the 1940s, during the war, I think. Or after the war, but in the 40s sometime. And actually, he was already a rabbi maybe there before the war. Before the war. Take that back, in the 1930s. Anyway, they looked to him to join the group of Noisim Es HaDegel. And he, of course, if this is what Telz wants, he's going to do it. And then in 38, he writes a letter to the organizers of the Noisim Es HaDegel group, and he says to them, you failed. You're failing. He says, I happen to be in Warsaw. This is where I'm connecting it to Moshe. Let's go ahead. I was in Warsaw, and I couldn't find but one kosher restaurant where I could eat at. Now, he was a very frum person, so he had a standard. But the letter implies, I'm just telling you a letter, this is in his, this isn't made up. He says, I came there for meetings or whatever the case. I needed something to eat. And I asked around. They told me, yeah, there's one restaurant here, place you can eat. I was, what does that tell you, Moshe? It tells you that the situation, by and large, was still schwach, was very weak. So the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, understood this, and he had some of his students visit the yeshivas and work with the existing yeshivas, not to do a coup and to overtake, no, but to work with the existing. I make that as a point because there are other letters that I found that I also cited in another book, where you see clearly in my book on Hasidim, on the Baviv and Belz and Ger and Vishnitz, he clearly says to the two students the student that went there to check out the yeshivas, I'm not looking to overtake any yeshivas. I want to, if there's a place that you feel could use a yeshiva to boost the morale of the students and to give them more Yiddishkeit, let me know. And that's where we should place the yeshiva. So clearly you see that his interest was not to overtake them and overrun them, but rather to work with them. And I think that's a very important piece of history for Lubavitch to know. So anyway, this journal, Hatomim, is a very important one. The word Hatomim means the sincere one, right? The Lubavitcher students in the yeshiva are called Tmimim, and the singular is Tamim. So if you're in a Chabad shul and there's a Gabbai, and we have a Gabbai here, but it's not a Chabad shul, but a Gabbai in a Chabad shul will many times, if he calls up a student who's not married, he'll call him up Hatomim. Ya'amoid, Hatomim, so-and-so. And it's not obligatory. And in fact, it's going to raise some antennas to people who are old-fashioned. They're going to say, what? But Hatomim means someone who learns in Chabad Yeshiva. Now, one last point of information. You will notice on certain tombstones, let's say Rabbi Yoel Kahn's tombstone, which you could probably find online, it says, Hatomim, Rabbi Yoel Kahn, Ben Hatomim, Rabbi Rafal Nachman HaKahn. In other words, in Lubavitch, in Chabad, the issue of learning in a Lubavitch yeshiva was a mainstay, was a pride. It was in a way more important than the Rav and the Reb. The fact that you learn in a Lubavitch yeshiva in Tomchei Tmimim, in the Chabad credo and ideology, it's like the highest compliment. And that's why certain people, the people have written for those who passed on, whether it be a father or etc., Hatomim. So the name of this journal that we're going to read from right now, after this long introduction, is called Hatomim, Volume 3, page 66. Let me read it. Follow along, please. Velvel, this is note 7. Moshe sent out a WhatsApp, so you could find it on your WhatsApp. Or if you have the Sefer on the essence of Hasidus. There are 3 basic souls in every Jew: the godly soul, the intellectual soul, and the natural soul. The natural soul we call Nefesh HaBamis. Each of these 3 souls contains a full complement of both intellectual and emotional faculties in accordance with its nature. In other words, you got 3, and each of the 3 has a component of seichel and a component of midos. So it's 3 times 2 is 6. Before I go further, I need to make sure you understand what I just said. If not, ask me. In other words, yes, Moshe, go ahead.
I didn't. You said that each one of the neshamas has what?
Has faculties A neshama, a nefesh, is not a faculty. A faculty is the tool and instrument used by the soul, by the nefesh.
So that would be what?
Seichel, one faculty is the mind, the use of the mind, and midos, the use of the heart, the emotions. So in other words, the godly soul has a set of seichel and midos that it uses based on it being godly. The natural soul, the nefesh abamis, has a set of seichel and midos based on its animalistic natural tendencies, and the intellectual soul also has an element. Excuse me. Excuse me. An element of seichel and midos based on its intellectual soul. That's what it said until now. Now, the natural soul is called the animal soul, nefesh abamis. Why? For all of its desires are directed towards materialistic and animalistic ends. I think that's clear, spelled out clearly in English. Now we're talking about the second soul. The intellectual part, the intellectual part of the animal soul, okay, the intellectual, the seichel of the animal soul, of the animal nefesh, engages in rationalizing actions according to its own understanding, and is connected with self-preservation and self-justification. Okay? In other words, what is the aspect of seichel, of intellect, from the perspective of the animal soul? It's to justify what it wants. It's to justify its in preservation, self-needs. But it does it with seichel, right? What about the component of emotions within the animal soul? The emotional part of the animal soul is what we call the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, i.e., the emotional part of the animal soul is the inclination to do evil, while the intellectual part of the animal soul, next page, is the means of justifying the act. There is the act of evil, it's wrong. The act is wrong. That's called the emotions, the feelings. And then there is justifying it. How can I justify it? Because the animal soul says, I want this and I need to preserve it and I need to justify it because otherwise I'm a complete lunatic, a complete nut, a complete outcast. Bob, close the light, please. Is this clear? Before we go further, you gotta tell me if it's clear to you what we just said. If not, we have to explain it. How about this? Would someone want to explain what we just said in their own words? Give me an example. Give me an example of what we're learning now. Give me an example, then I'll know you understand it. Anyone? Don't be shy now. We just met each other. Come on.
Yeah, I can give it a shot.
Go ahead, Avram. Good. Let's go. Go for it.
You get three souls. You got intellectual soul, divine soul, and animal soul. Each one of those have two. I guess attributes or
Two instruments, two ways. Two ways of.
They have each one has intellect and emotions. For the animal soul, the intellect is I would say it's like a klipa noga. It's not good or bad, but the emotions come from the side of Yetzer Hara. That's what drives the animal soul to try to do all these things to satisfy its desires and lusts.
Okay, good. And
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question. So, you discussed it in last year's workbook. there, unfortunately. So, in the Yitzhara, the same with Nefesh Bahamas, because from my understanding, as far as I learned, Nefesh Bahamas is not necessarily bad. It just wants you to keep us alive. So, and it's not necessarily something which is, initially bad. So that's just to understand, because it says here now that it's Yitzhara. So that.
But Velvel, it says here, that's why we're learning it. I'm glad you're asking. It says the emotional part of the Nefesh Abamis is Yetzer Hara, not the intellectual part.
Okay.
And that's exactly why we're learning this. In other words, so when, again, this is the way Chabad Hasidus sees it. I mean, I don't think you'll find this in other Hasidic literature, this division. This is a very much a Chabad idea. That when we say Yetzer Hara, Isser, we mean that aspect of the Nefesh Abamis that's emotional in the sense of acting, doing the bad act. Hello?
Yeah, doing the deed.
During the deed. That's the Yetzer Hara. So that's the emotion within the Nefesh Abamis. What about the justification for doing the act? That's, like you said, Klippas Noiga. That's not evil. That is a rationale. 1 second, Moshe. A rationale to explain why I'm doing it.
Why is that the Nefesh Sichlis though?
Oh, wait, excellent. Oh, this is a deep Hasidic student. Wait, good question. Wait till the next paragraph. Yes.
So which is the part of the Nefesh Bahamis? Which is the part that's the drive of the Nefesh Bahamis that says, I want the ice cream. I gotta have the ice cream.
It depends. So if the I want is the emotion.
Okay.
Why I want and how I want, that's the intellect.
Okay.
You got it?
Okay.
Good. Let's continue now. Next paragraph. Until one has the appropriate instruments with which he can correct the inclinations of the animal soul, one must first break one's natural desires. In other words, before you work on converting, transforming the desires, the first thing is you got to say, stop. I'm going in a bad direction. Stop. That's meaning break the desires. True divine service, however, is not breaking, but fixing, mending, in Hebrew, tikkun. And one begins the service of mending with the intellectual soul. Yaini, here he answers the question briefly. The middle soul. You see? So we have an animal soul that the emotional part wants the bad, right? Now you want to, you realize that it's not good. You want to stop. You want to change. You'd like it shouldn't, you shouldn't have the desire. It doesn't happen from one extreme to the other. It's very unusual. The first thing is you have to tikkun. You have to mend. Says the Rebbe, says this note, the mending comes from that intellectual soul, the middle soul. The instrument is the study of Hasidus, which includes the contemplation of those ideas which are in consonance with one's level of understanding and of material which also can be understood by and is able to arouse the heart. In other words, one minute. We say that the intellectual soul also has a component of seichel and midos. So Yoini's question was before, the seichel of the nefesh habamis, to justify, I want this, I want that, his question is, why isn't that part of the intellectual soul? Very simple, Yoini. Because that seichel is a subordinate to his want. It's not pure seichel. It's not pure logic. It's already a tainted logic. But it's not tainted to the point where it's evil logic. It's a logic that leans towards the want. Pure seichel, which comes from the middle soul, the intellectual soul, that's pure. So in the sense, it has the ability to begin reparation, tikkun. The seichel of the nefesh habamis can't begin tikkun. You know why? Because it's leaning towards the want, the emotion, the bad, and justifying it. So how can it be? In other words, the seichel, what?
It's bringing to mind the parable of the Duba Magid of the painting the target around the arrow. So the emotion of the Nefesh HaBahamis has a desire. Now comes the intellect of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and it's going to come to justify that desire.
Correct.
It's painting the target around the arrow.
Right. Very good. Painting the target around the arrow. You guys understand what he said? So the Dubna Bagid. You can either have the arrow, this is what I want, and now I have to justify it, so I make a target around it. You know?
But that's all within the Nefesh Habahamis.
That is Nefesh Habamis. In other words, by Nefesh Habamis, it begins with the emotion. It doesn't say this here, but I'm telling you what it says elsewhere. The Nefesh Habamis... What?
But then you said that the Nefesh, within the Nefesh Habahamis, the component of Seichel justifies it.
That's right. So it's already schlepped. It's schlepped in.
So what is the... Okay, so now we're in the Nefesh...
Nefesh Hasilik begins the mending, the tikkun. It's not good. I disagree. In other words, the nefesh, the intellect of the nefesh hasichlis is the intellectual argumentation to the argument of the seichel of nefesh habamis. The seichel of nefesh habamis is what justifies the craving, right? Comes along the seichel of the nefesh hasichlis and says, you have it all wrong, and I'll prove to you why. And when it proves to it why, it can begin mending, tikkun. In other words, to go from the nefesh habamis state to the nefesh elokis state is like impossible. I'm not going to say impossible, it never can happen. It could be a ne'ilah and it could be a tshuva, that there's always an exception. But we're talking now the regular route. The regular route is that in order to get to elokis, to nefesh elokis, you have to first break the ice, stop the pattern of the behavior. So, Hillel's not here, but let's talk... Velvel said, we have another Isser, the doctors, the idea of you have a craving, you have an addiction, before you can talk about transforming the addiction where it's no longer an addiction, on the contrary, you're addicted now to something healthy, you first got to stop it. You got to break it somehow. I mean, and again, I'm not an expert in that field, but yes, Moshe.
I just want to share this I think we've spoken about this before in Shir, but this passage the paragraph we just read about the fixing, the mending.
Yes.
Reminds me of the story. There was once a chassid that brought a snuff box to, I don't know if it was the Midler Rebbe or the Tzemach Tzedek.
To the Tzemach Tzedek.
Okay. And he gave him the snuff box. And the the Tzemach Tzedek, he right away knew, he took the gift, but he right away knew that it wasn't something he was going to use. It was like, it just wasn't within his sphere of using the snuff box. But so I guess there was another chassid.
So he told him, give it to my son, the Marash, the Rebbe Marash. He said, for him, it's an avodah. In other words, he took, would benefit. Go ahead.
So he took it, but then he somehow said to one of his chassidim, who was close to him, said, you know what, I'm not going to use it, I'm going to use it for the shiny. I'm going to use the shiny silver underside of the lid as a mirror to look at to help me to put on tefillin.
Right.
So the his friend wanted to say, okay, fine, I'll take it. He was about to take it and just break it off. And the Maharash then said to him, no. He said, my father, that's not our way to break.
You're right.
He said, our way is to remove the pin and then to take it off.
Right.
So it's just so, I feel it's so connected with what the story is very much connected to what we just read.
Right.
And to me,
Right. No. What you're saying is that you first have to stop by mending. Let me read the next paragraph.
I'm sorry, I mean, you have to, it's not even before that. Person has to first realize, if there's something that we have that you have to, I guess, realize the inherent possibility in something. And then from there, you want to take it, and how do you channel that possibility in a healthy way, as opposed to just taking something and breaking it with a hammer.
Okay, and that comes from the nefesh hasichlis. The realization that you should mend it and not break it and all that is from the nefesh hasichlis. Both the godly soul and the intellectual soul have emotional attributes. So now he's jumping to the godly soul and to the intellectual soul, and he's now talking about the emotional component within each, or call it character traits. The intellectual soul is naturally drawn to that which is below, it, and the godly soul is naturally drawn to that which is above it, right? In other words, like this. When we talk about the intellectual soul mending, nevertheless, it's an intellectual soul within this world, so it's drawn to the world. How do I mend something in the world? The godly soul wants to completely forget about the world. It desires to be with God, to transform the nature of one's... That's it. I'm not going to read the rest, because the rest is relevant to the paragraph in the text, which we'll get to when we learn the Maamar, when we learn this essay. But what we learned here is the last part. The godly soul is not the intermediary. This was to answer Moshe's question of last week. Why is this the intermediary? Because the godly soul desires to upward, to be with God. So its mind component and its heart component is God, to feel God, to understand God. We're not at that point yet. We're at a point where we have a nefesh abamis and we have a taiva. So you have to somehow get it to move from the left to the right. You need to have a middle. And that's the importance of the rational soul, of the nefesh hasichlis, which explains rationally to the nefesh abamis is intellect. You are wrong in your thinking. You're justifying the taiva and the act is wrong, and I'll prove to you why it's wrong. So that yes, sir.
I hear everything that you're saying,
Yeah.
and I understand what you're saying, but I'm having trouble placing it within the context of what I've learned within Tanya. Where does this concept of the nefesh hasichlis appear in Tanya?
So as I said last week, clearly it appears in chapter 42. You'll actually see the words nefesh hasichlis, but it's not explained there. But those words are mentioned there. That's just for the record. But even in chapter 1, when the Alter Rebbe is talking about the nefesh habamis, and he says klipas noga, Reb Hillel Parich, who wrote a commentary, explains that he's also alluding to the nefesh hasichlis, and that goyim, non-Jews, have a nefesh hasichlis, and that's why, in addition to the Chasidi Umas Ha'olam, which are from the translucent klipas noiga, not shelish klipas atmeyas, when they use their seichel, that component is klipas noga. So the answer is, you're asking a question. In chapter 1, when he speaks about klipas noga, Reb Hillel says that the Alter Rebbe is alluding to the nefesh hasichlis. And then there's one more point, and I have to stop because I have another shir. And that is, when you learn about free will, and actually the Tanya of this week, now this chapter, Bchira, you have just a simple question: where is this free will? How can you tell me free will is the nefesh abamis? Remember, the nefesh is the drive. Velvel, I think, meant right, the drive, the ikar. So if your drive is bahamis, there's no free will, and if you're on such a holy tzaddik that your drive is elokis, so then you're also not a free will. Where's the free will? And the answer is, the free will is in the place of the nefesh hasichlis, the intermediary soul. That is where it can either go and give in to the nefesh bahamis seichel and say, I'm going to support you, or it can say, I want to support what's greater than myself, the godly soul, the godly desire and intellect, and I want to go that route. And that's what free will is. So what I'm saying to you as a third point is that the whole concept of free will, which is, again, in these chapter 48 and 49 of Tanya, that would be another pointer to Nefesh HaSichlis. So chapter 1, chapter 42, chapter 48, I would say, or 49, the chapters where it alludes to those things. But you're right, when most people learn Tanya, they don't come across that clearly. If you have, and we used to have in the Eish Kodesh, not in the Maamar Shul, the next shul, we used to have Chasidus Muva Eres on Tanya. Over there in chapter 1, get a hold of it. It's in Hebrew, and it's very well explained. They talk about this. So find it, okay? Everyone will see everyone tomorrow. Have a great day. Shalom. Bye-bye. Take care.